the Apprenticeship and LBS Webinar. Today you're going to have two different people presenting. I will start out presenting the first half of the webinar, and then Stuart Callio will present the second half of the webinar. Today we're going to talk to you about two MTCU-funded projects that were put together to support the apprenticeship goal path. The first project is the Literacy and Basic Skills and Apprenticeship Supporting Clients Through Curriculum, and that project was done by Literacy Link South Central. I'm the person who worked on that project, so I'll be talking a bit to you today about that particular project. When I'm done talking, Stuart is going to talk to you about the developing best practices for increasing, supporting, and retaining apprentices in Northern Ontario, which was done by the Literacy Northwest Network, and Stuart was the person who coordinated that particular project. So the first project that we're going to talk to you about today is the Literacy and Basic Skills and Apprenticeship project, supporting clients through curriculum. This project, once again, as I said, was done by Literacy Link South Central, and I worked as the researcher and writer on the project. For those of you who don't know me, I do a lot of project work, and I also manage a Literacy and Basic Skills program in Brantford, Ontario. It's a school board program, and I'm the manager / I also do some instructing, and I am also the data entry clerk. So it's a small program, and I do a little bit of everything. And then I do some curriculum writing and other projects on the side. So this particular project started off because we know that although apprenticeship is a goal path, one of 5 goal paths that we currently have in the Literacy and Basic Skills program, what we also knew is that not a significant number of clients were actually on this particular goal path in Ontario. And in fact, as of the end of February 2014, so in this current fiscal year, there are only about 2,300 people who have actually indicated that that is their goal path. And that's out of a total of more than 38,000 people in Ontario that are actually pursuing or in the Literacy and Basic Skills program. We know that employment and literacy have been the focus of Employment Ontario for the past several years, and as the Employment Ontario agencies have been transforming and developing closer connections, Literacy Link South Central knew that there was a need to start looking at how to support clients with apprenticeship goals, and also how they also knew there was a need to start to try to give agencies the ability to encourage clients to pursue apprenticeship as a goal, maybe clients who hadn't thought about that in the past because they didn't necessarily know that that was a feasible goal for them. Feedback from LBS programs suggested that preparing clients for apprenticeship can be very daunting. There are over 160 trades, and even though many of those trades do have accessible curriculum, it's very challenging for practitioners to take the material and adapt it to the OALCF. So that was the basis of actually going ahead and asking the Ministry for funding to pursue this type of project. As far as the process that we used to make sure that we had all our checks and balances in place, first of all, there was an advisory committee in place throughout the duration of the whole entire project. The curricula that was developed through the project was piloted at 3 different service delivery agencies, and it was piloted by a variety of learners and practitioners. Both learner feedback and practitioner feedback were collected through an independent evaluation process. So we tried to make sure that once the curriculum, there was input at the outset from the advisory committee, and that the curricula was actually piloted at a number of different agencies. Early on, we coordinated with the other project that you're going to hear about later on in this presentation, and members from that project sat in on the advisory committee because we were working on, both working on apprenticeship, and we wanted to make sure that we coordinated what we were doing in some way, shape, or form. So that process involved some meetings and discussion around what products and deliverables we were developing in our project and what products and deliverables were being developed through the Literacy Northwest project, and to try to make sure that there was coordination there and that the projects fit together in some way. So we did do different things and we took different approaches, but there is definitely a connection between the two projects and the deliverables that were developed. Before we started, we had to decide what exactly we were going to focus on, and the original project talked about trade groups as opposed to specific trades. There are so many different trades that we felt that it would be more useful for agencies to be able to introduce apprenticeship to learners by introducing them to groups of like trades. We did this, we determined what trade groups we were going to focus on by looking at a lot of data. We reviewed the top 5 trades that are on ApprenticeSearch.com. We also looked at top trade registrations and completions that are tracked by Statistics Canada. So we looked at the top 3 trades where apprentices actually register and also the top 3 trades that they actually complete, and we looked at that data from the last few years. We also surveyed workforce planning boards across the province, 2 colleges, and the apprenticeship network to determine which trades ranked highest in terms of potential employment and attraction of apprentices. And we also wanted to find out which trades the apprentices struggled the most with, especially in the in-class portion of the apprenticeship. So those were the different things that we looked at in order to narrow down the trades that we were going to focus on. We also coordinated with the Literacy Northwest project to see what trades they were going to focus on as they developed their deliverables as well, to see how our trade groups that we were selecting would kind of fit in or mesh with what they were doing. So the advisory committee at this point was quite active in the project in reviewing the research and making final decisions about which trades we would actually focus on for the development of the curriculum that we developed. So the 3 trade groups that we ended up focusing on were the construction trades, automotive-related trades, and food trades. And essentially what we did is for each one of those trade groups, we developed a curriculum module to support the introduction of that trade group to learners and have them explore that trade a little further. Within each of the 3 modules, so there's a module that's been developed for each trade, there are 3 separate parts within the module. So the first part really focuses on exploring apprenticeship in general, because many of the LBS clients that we were targeting through this curriculum development have never even thought of apprenticeship as a potential goal. This section is generic to all 3 modules. So in each one of the modules, the learner would actually do the same set of task-based activities to help them explore apprenticeship and get a sense of whether or not apprenticeship may or may not be a goal path that would be for them. The second part of each module is where the learner will continue to explore apprenticeship, but it's narrowed down to a particular trade, and they learn more about a particular trade. So within that trade group, they learn about the trade group generally, and then they start to narrow down a trade within that trade group that they might want to pursue. In this particular module, we've also included a couple of 1 or 2 more practical task-based activities that would relate to a specific trade if they want to do that. The third section of each module is focused on preparing for Certificate of Qualification exams, preparing to write for those types of exams. In our research, especially when we talked to the workforce planning boards and the colleges in particular, they indicated that many clients struggle with the exam writing portion and being able to understand how to write exams, in particular multiple choice exams. So the focus in this section is introducing them to the training standards that they have to understand and also understand how to write multiple choice exams. And so that that's a fairly generic section as well, because it's relevant to all of the trade groups. So that kind of gives you an idea of the curriculum, the overview of the curriculum, and how it was, how it kind of flows for the participants. The curriculum itself is actually a series of task-based activities, and the task-based activities follow the format that's used on the task-based activities for LBS website that's been under development for the last few years. This slide gives you a sense of one of the modules, so the construction trades module. I've just pulled that as an example, and it gives you a listing of all the different task-based activities in that module. So in each module, everybody completes a self-assessment up front to see if this particular trade group is something that they might be interested in. They learn a little bit about apprenticeship in general. They learn about the different places that they can get information about apprenticeship, and then they start to narrow it down in part 2 to the particular trade group and start to think about a trade that might be of interest to them. And then in part 3, they move on to looking at writing certificate of qualification exams. This chart indicates the range of competencies that we covered. So there's a significant amount of find and use information that's covered within the task-based activities, as well as communicating ideas and information, less of the math or understand and use numbers. And then digital technology is integrated into a lot of the tasks, because a lot of the information that apprenticeships are actually looking at is available online. So it requires them to be able to navigate and utilize digital technology quite a bit. As far as delivering the modules, we had them piloted, so they were delivered in their entirety in a number of different programs. Within each of the modules, you have about 13 or 14 task-based activities, and within that there's 30 subtasks in each module. So the larger activities, there's 13 to 14 of them, and then within each activity there's a number of different tasks that they do. Our focus was really OELCF level 1 and 2. So the tasks are level 1 and 2 tasks, and they incorporate a variety of the competencies, which you could see in the construction trades overview. We formatted all of the activities to the task-based activities for LBS website template, with the intention that many of them could be actually added to that portal, and also the fact that many people are familiar with that particular template right now. So they've all been formatted using that template. They can be completed by individual learners, or they could be delivered in a group setting. It all depends on how you'd like to deliver it within your program. We asked, while they were being delivered and piloted, we asked for people to estimate how long they felt it would take people to complete each module. It all depends on the learners and the number of learners that you have, but the range seemed to be about 6 to 12 hours to complete a module. Once again, it all depends on, you know, the skill level of the clients as they attempt to complete the tasks, whether or not they're prepared, how much teaching you have to do as they actually complete the tasks, whether or not they're familiar with using the technology, things like that. But it gives you an idea of a range. The Literacy Northwest project, which Stuart will talk about when I'm finished, how we ended up looking at the integration at the end is their tasks are very specific trade-based tasks, and we looked at them from the point of view of them being extension task-based activities. So if a learner actually completes like the construction trades module and they're very interested in pursuing a particular construction trade, there are additional task-based activities that have been developed through the Literacy Northwest project that are specific to particular trades, and those activities might be something that a learner moves on to later to complete if they're interested in a particular trade. So we've mapped all of the activities developed through that project to the 3 modules that we have in the Literacy Links South Central project. So where will I be able to find this curriculum? It's actually going to be available in 3 different places. So as I said, we use the task-based activity portal or the task-based activity website template to develop all the activities with the intent of providing those activities to the website, which is hosted by Quill, and if they will, so many of them will probably appear on the website there. You'll be able to search for them, and they will be there. We've asked that if the activities are on there, it's referenced that they're part of a set of activities that comprise a curriculum module. So they should be available there, or most of them should be available there at some time once they get on the portal. We're just in the last week of getting everything organized, so I imagine that will happen in April. The modules are also going to be available for download directly from the Literacy Link South Central website. So as with any project, they will post all of those 3 modules, and you'll be able to download them directly from that website. Finally, another part of this project was to involve the Learning Hub and to provide what we developed to the Learning Hub so that they could adapt the materials and offer it through e-channel on their online Moodle classroom. They participated in the advisory committee from the get-go as well, so they had access to the materials on an ongoing basis, and they are they are currently adapting them so that they can also be delivered online. So you'll be able to access, or learners will be able to access the courses or modules through the Learning Hub once they've completed that online adaptation of the materials that were developed through our project. So there will be 3 different places to access the materials, and technically 2 different modes. One will be the paper task-based material that you can access from the task-based activity website or Literacy Link South Central's website, and then there will be an actual online version of the modules that will be delivered through the Learning Hub. So that gives you a snapshot of what we worked on in the Literacy Link South Central project, where we were building curriculum to support apprenticeship and to support the introduction of apprenticeship, in particular to learners who maybe hadn't thought about that as a goal path. And before I turn it over to Stuart so that he can talk about the project that Literacy Northwest worked on, I will entertain any questions that you might have.
Okay, we do have a few. Would these tasks focus on complexity level 3?
No. Our project, because we were focused more on introducing apprenticeship as a goal path, the complexity is primarily level 1, level 2 of the task-based activities that were developed.
Okay, and just a clarification on that, she meant the Lit Northwest Extension tasks.
I'll let Stuart speak to that, but for the most part, I believe those tasks are of a higher complexity.
Okay. Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, yes, we focused on complexity levels 2 and 3 across just 2 competencies, and I'll speak to those. Sometimes, in fact, we wrote tasks that were beyond level 3, and again, I'll speak to that too.
Okay, and just a comment from Deborah Flynn, since you mentioned her. Normally we don't say who's commenting, but just because it's relevant in this case. Just saying, Robin, we could put a link on the additional resources page to point people to the LLSC website from the task-based portal. Okay, and a couple of others. Sorry, just have to scroll here. I was surprised not to see trades such as millwright and bricklayer and machinist in the list of the 3 top trade groups. Are they included in the construction trades? Just what's included in that trade?
Well, the trades that are included would be because they've been grouped within construction trades, the learner who's actually completing those task-based activities, as they move through the process, they would be selecting more particular trades to focus on. So through the interested in within that trade group. So any trade covered by construction trades would be included in that, and without getting into the specifics, because there's several in each of the trade groups. Construction, you know, if somebody was interested in being an electrician or a plumber, they would definitely pursue that through the completion of those activities, okay, if they were looking at construction trades, for example.
Great. Are there any activities that show the complexity level needed to be successful in writing the tests for apprenticeship?
No, we didn't look at it from that perspective. We just looked at it from the perspective of introducing people in to, for example, writing multiple choice tests. So the focus of our project is really introductory in nature. Like, here are some of the things that you need to think about if you're thinking about apprenticeship as a goal path. Explore a little bit more about particular apprenticeships, and just introducing people to the concept of writing multiple choice tests.
Okay. When people explored...
If I could jump in on that answer too. Yeah, we did focus on trying to prepare learners with the literacy skills to actually write those tests, recognizing that the tests are highly complex reading tasks, or can be. So the tasks that we wrote tend to be challenging, and we try to set them at the level 3 and sometimes beyond. So if a learner can do those, can unpack those tasks and manage them successfully, then that's an indicator that they can handle the actual apprenticeship tests. It's not going to be 100%, but that's the direction we headed.
Okay, and just to clarify, that Stuart's talking about the tasks that were developed through the Literacy Northwest project, and I'm talking about the curriculum that was developed through the LLSC project. So we weren't focused on that. We were just focused on introducing people to the concept of writing a multiple choice test.
Okay. In Thunder Bay, we have a skilled shortage in the cooking field. Was that part of the food trades?
Cooking is part of the food trade, yes.
Okay. And did your project show that helping people to understand the training standards and helping them to understand multiple choice exams led to an increase in success rates for exam completion?
I mean, at this point, we have no idea of whether or not that would help them, because it was primarily focused on introducing people to apprenticeship. What they're doing within the curriculum that we developed is a long ways away from actually becoming an apprentice. So, and we certainly weren't able to test something like that in 8 months. We were actually only able to have people complete the modules and indicate whether or not they felt that it supported them in thinking about apprenticeship from our perspective. Stuart might have a different take on that when he talks to you specifically about the task that they developed.
Okay, great. And just as a quick check, we did have one person indicating that there were some sound issues. So if anybody else has problems, just let us know through the text chat. And Stuart, if you are ready, I will pass it over to you.
Okay, I've come off mute. I'm just going to clean up my screen, and we're okay to go. Great questions from the group. They've given me something to focus on for my part of the presentation. I'm really pleased to see this level of interest in the project, and certainly I expect to get some good questions following my presentation. So thank you, Robin. You've set up my part of the session really well. Setting the context, I think it's clear to everybody that apprenticeship is high on the public agenda right now. It's high in the news, it's high on the politicians, the employers, and so on. We started to explore apprenticeship with a project in 2012 that looked at supporting apprenticeship completions. We were looking at what could we do to get more workers, learners into LBS programs through the EO network and support them. And this project that we are completing this year, looking specifically at writing tasks, is an outgrowth of that. I'll talk later about a third project that we've submitted, which is a continuation of this project, and I'll mention that at the end of my presentation. But just for context, I'm not going to speak at all about apprenticeship. It's a challenging topic to understand, but we don't have time for that. But in Ontario, we have 156 trades in 4 sectors: construction, industrial, motive power, and service. Some trades are compulsory, others are voluntary. Compulsory means you have to complete your certification to be legally able to work in that trade. And most trades have a certificate of qualification, even if they're voluntary or compulsory will for sure. But the key thing here is that employers are often pushing applicants to have that certification or grade 12, and that's the target group that we're looking at who are showing up in our literacy programs. The apprenticeship really falls within the bigger picture of a skills gap. There's a labor shortage and a skills mismatch, although the papers are full of arguments about whether there is an actual labor shortage at the moment. But I just want to read a quote from Rick Miner, who many of you will know, wrote a book called, or an article called "People Without Jobs and Jobs Without People." And he kind of sums it up nicely. He says, first we need to find ways to increase Canada's labor force or its participation rate, or both. We need to do this to counteract the effects of the pending retirement of the baby boomers. Second, and at the same time, we need to find ways to increase the skill level of our workforce. And we need to do this to meet the challenges posed by the emerging knowledge economy. It's the number of people who work and higher skills. We need both. And the project that we're working on with the task development is looking at addressing that. It's not a 100% solution, but it's a small step on the way. This is an interesting statistic that relates to our project, and it just came up to my attention recently. The average age of apprenticeship starting in the province of Ontario is 27, and I was quite surprised. When we did our first project, the people we worked with, the average age was 38. They were the people showing up in our literacy programs, and I knew that their apprenticeship tends to involve older people. But what this is suggesting is that it's still not a high priority on the high school agendas, on the parents' agenda, the people who can promote it. So we're seeing older workers, older learners coming into our literacy programs, and we're seeing people who are trying to get into apprenticeship either through the challenge process or through the formal in-school employer-based process. And as people get older, we know that skills not used are skills lost. So we all know this kind of history of the longer you go, the longer out of school, the longer you don't use skills, the weaker those become. And our project is trying to address that issue of the skills gap for workers who are trying to get back into employment, into the trades, who have skills that are wobbly. And we can assess those, we can develop them, we can help get them reoriented around the skill level that they need to be successful. Here's an example of a skills match that came from the PAC survey. And it's an interesting one because it looks at level 2, and level 2 presents adults who often look like they can manage well with literacy, and they speak well and they present well and so on, but their reading skills are soft. And when you look at those sample sentences and say, do they make sense or not, The first sentence, obviously, 3 girls ate the song, doesn't make sense to someone who reads well, but to someone who doesn't, they will read 3 girls ate the song and recognize the words, but the context for the words, the meaning of the words may not make sense, and they'll say, yeah, that looks fine. The man drove the green car, makes sense. A little more challenging one, a person who is 20 years old is older than a person who is 30 years old. These are the kinds of language that someone in level 2 who is still learning to read is going to have trouble with, and it's the kind of challenges that we would see in our literacy programs. Best way to maybe frame it is that for most apprenticeship or most trades, we're really looking at level 3 essential skills, often level 4, to be successful in doing the tasks, and yet we're looking at people who are coming into our programs who are often still struggling to learn to read and have not yet progressed to the level where they're reading to learn. The first project we did in 2012 identified some real issues around the difficulty of the exams as a barrier to challengers who were trying to pass the exam who didn't have the literacy skills to do that. Here's an example of some quotes from our first group. And I'm talking a lot about the first group now because I'm really setting up why we focused on doing the second project, which is the task development. Understanding the questions. These are the questions on the certificate of qualification, the exams. Multiple choice questions are all the same with very little difference between them. Make the questions easier to better understand them. We challenge that. They don't want them easier, they just want them constructed better so that they can access them and unpack them in a way that makes sense. We also found, and I suspect this is common and there hasn't been done a lot of research out there to my knowledge, another participant reported that his learning disability made sorting through the complex text and selecting the correct answer very difficult. And the particular disability that this person had was called receptive language disorder, which leads to an overemphasis on meaning. Multiple variables are considered when provided with an answer. And if you've looked at a multiple choice question where the setup is in the brief description and the text, they can become quite convoluted and they can lead you down many paths in many ways, and then you go to 4 possible answers and try to connect that to the text. And so someone, in this case the person with the receptive language disorder, that just goes from muddled to even more muddled to impossible. They can always guess, but then if you're guessing right, you're putting someone into a program who's passing an exam who still doesn't understand. The apprenticeship gap between the number of apprentices who are actually enrolled and the number of complete, it tends to sit around 50%. And people will argue about the right number, but the gray line that you see down at the bottom is the number of new registrations who are continuing, and the red line down below it is the number of apprenticeship completions. Now this only goes up to 2009, and the trend tends to be the same as we go forward. I've actually talked with TCU and looked at more recent data, and the trend tends to be the same. And the gap looks fairly large, but you also have to think about the gap as a 3 to 5 year window. So if we start at 208 and look backwards to when they started, the gap is a little smaller. Or if we go to a 5-year window and look back, it's still a little smaller yet. But the point is there are fewer people completing apprenticeships than the people who register and start into them. There's a lot of data out there around apprenticeship completions, who gets involved, which trades are most challenging, and so on. And my question to you, and I'm certainly following up on it in formal and informal ways, is how might apprenticeship data inform literacy and essential skills planning and programming? If we could use that data to better plan, how we approach and recruit and promote our programs. I mentioned earlier about the skill level for the trades, and the dark yellow boxes are the higher levels. The yellow boxes are level 3, and the well, I've selected certain trades and occupations. So for carpenters, for example, which we did work with, reading level 3, document use level 4, numeracy level 4 for those literacy skills. Cooks, level 3 for reading, level 3 for document use, level 4 for numeracy. Those are taken from the essential skills profiles. They compare very favorably with things like employment counselors, dentists, registered nurses, social workers, and so on. The whole point of this slide when I show it is that level 3 is really becoming a benchmark and very common for a minimum level of skill requirement to be successful with the tasks that need to be performed in a trade. And that means the in-school work before entering into a trade. Remember that 90% of the time that an apprentice spends is on the job with an employer, learning hands-on and so on, and 10% is in school. In school is often a lot of reading-based, numeracy and so on. On the job, again, looking at actual tasks, reading tasks on the job, numeracy tasks on the job, and so on. Trades are skilled trades, and I think that term skilled trades is really becoming more and more important. Here's a sample of the kind of person we saw who would certainly benefit from the work we're doing with our current project around writing tasks. This was a person, age 60, looking to enter industrial millwright, married, grown children, worked in a paper mill for years and has been laid off, has been sort of going from job to job to job, has attempted a Red Seal trade and was unsuccessful, is not working currently, knows that the Red Seal trade or the certification is important to being able to find work, and entered a literacy program by word of mouth. We found that that was a very strong vehicle for recruiting people to particularly rural or remote community programs. So the process we took with this person was to review the actual exam results, and I'll speak a little bit about how we focused on a part of those exam results for our current project. Identified a focus for review, in this case mechanical components and fluid power, did self-assessment. We helped this person acquire a reader for the exam. The initial assessment suggested high levels of competency, but the focus on test-taking skills and strategies, and Robin talked about some of the tools they developed around test-taking strategies. Those are the kinds of things that could be used again in this case. Review of exam sections and the tasks involved. This was a visual learner, so text-based questions were a challenge for him. Common terms and acronyms for this trade. We found that specialized language was often a serious barrier. And what we brought a number of resources to the work with the person. As it turns out, he's been attending, or he had attended the program once a week, studied at home, had done a number of interviews, and he finally got a position in Fort McMurray and has moved out of the province. It's unfortunate he couldn't find work in the area, but still wants to improve or to pursue his certification. We didn't have a lot of apprenticeship-specific tasks that a person like this could work with, and one of the trades we looked at was millwright. I don't know if this would have made a difference, but we would have had more resources to work with. It's a real nod to the literacy service provider, indicating the excellent service. The learner felt that this was valuable time spent trying to prepare. And so if we have a willing learner with an engaged practitioner and we can add more resources to them, I think it's a win-win all around. So our project in particular, we didn't want to just simply blast away at looking at all of the trades and trying to develop tasks. And Robin talked about, actually we shared a lot of our criteria and screening process with their project. So some of the questions we asked: which skilled trades are in the highest demand? Where is that demand geographically located? Which high demand skilled trades qualifying exams present the most difficulties for exam writers? Even narrower, which specific components, blocks of those exams do writers consistently have difficulty with? And what can be learned from developing apprenticeship-specific tasks for LBS learners? It was really important to narrow this down to trades that people were actually looking to enter, they were applying for, they were having trouble getting into, trades that were active, that had high registrations. But we also heard in the first project that sometimes it was just a particular component of the exam that consistently posed problems, and the other components they had no problems with. We wanted to focus on that, and that's what we did in our current project with developing tasks. So the deliverables, certainly we did the research to identify the trades that we wanted to work with in the areas of concern, and we shared that research with the Literacy Link South Central project. We developed 36 tasks aligned with barriers to apprenticeship completion and the apprenticeship goal path. We focused specifically on the competencies find and use information and understand and use numbers at complexity levels 2 and 3. Very narrow focus, and we're really glad we actually did that, because as we started to write tasks, we found that we started to involve B competencies, and the B competency is communicate ideas and information. For example, if we asked people to calculate something and enter it into an invoice, that became a B-level competency. We also found that we started to introduce digital tasks, but our focus was on the 2 first, and as a result we ended up getting 4 competencies covered. The tasks were shared with Literacy Link South Central for their apprenticeship modules Robin talked about, and then Quill for their provincial task portal. And as we speak, we're loading up the portal with the 36 tasks. I think we're about halfway completed right now. And I see there's a typo in that slide. Robin talked about our tasks being extension tasks. So in general, they looked at a very generalized view of how to access apprenticeship and how to prepare and to move along into the trades, the apprenticeship goal path, and some of the issues with that. And if there were particular trades that they were interested in and they were looking at higher level tasks to test their literacy skills against, then our tasks would serve that purpose. We did survey the field initially to confirm that what we found in our first project was actually true, which was specific blocks or blocks of exam questions would be problems, and that sometimes trade content was a lack of knowledge about the trades content was a problem. So this is an actual slide taken from our SurveyMonkey. It's probably difficult to read, but the question was, please identify the most common reasons for not passing the qualifying exam. It was one of about 10 or 11 questions that we asked. We had 53 people answer the question, and the 2 biggest responses by far were the ones I've highlighted at the top. Had difficulty with a specific block or blocks of exam questions, and again lack specific knowledge of some of the trade content on the exam. And after that, we listed other issues that we had identified earlier, but they clearly were not as high. So that assured us that we were on the right track with what we were focusing on. Let me just go back here, because someone mentioned, did we look at some of the other trades? There's 12 trades listed on this table. Actually 12, 13 with other. This list was developed, I won't go into the details of how I did that, but I used a number of criteria and applied it to a number of data sets that are out there, and came up with trades that really seem to have a profile for all kinds of important reasons. And we said, okay, let's throw that out to the field and ask them if they believe that there are some trades that are more demand than others. And what we got back was electrician, carpenter, automotive service, plumber, cook, industrial millwright, and we could have gone to trades like welder and heavy-duty equipment, hairstylist, and so on, but we chose to work with 6. So those were the 6. These are 4 of them that came up pretty high. And when we do if we're approved for a further project looking at developing digital tasks for trades, we'll take the same process as we've done here and look at trades that are really being impacted by digital technology, and trades that have a profile that are important because there's a lot of activity, they're in demand, et cetera, and focus on those. And you've heard me talk about particular blocks on the exam. This is from the manual called the National Occupational Analysis. It's a booklet that's available for apprentices programs. And this is just a bad slide from one page on it, but it sets out how the blocks of questions and content are set out in the entire trade manual. So you can see, for example, that block C, framing, is 22% of the content, block B, 20% is concrete, and so on. The exam questions, the certificate of qualifying exam questions, are also set out in the same proportions. And this allowed us to target areas on these trades where people were having particular problems and to focus our content of our tasks on those areas. Carpenter, we very quickly found out the most challenging area is block B, concrete. Concrete formwork, working with concrete, seems to be a real problem for exam writers. The other areas are not. And so we then focused with a trade expert on block B, concrete, and asked that trade expert to say, help us understand what this means. What do people do? What kind of documents do you have? What kind of materials can you provide us? And then in this case, our task writer worked with the trade expert to construct 6 tasks that were specifically related to that block. The idea, again, we want to be strategic about the kind of tasks we put in front of our learners, the ones that are going to be most useful to them. We found out in our first project that adult learners don't like to waste their time. If they come into a program, they want to do things that are useful and are going to move them along. This is just a snapshot of 6 of the tasks that we wrote for Carpenter. We have 6 trades, and we wrote 6 tasks for each, for 36 in total. And this kind of chart will show up in our final report. It looks similar to Robin's, and I was surprised to see it when she presented it because we didn't talk. So it's interesting how the layout came up. But this presents in a very quick and easy form the name of the task, the number of subtasks, what we call activities, the complexity levels 1, 2, or 3, and then we've simply identified where the task itself sets up in terms of those complexity levels. Those would be the level indicators. What's really interesting is we went through 36 tasks. Each task had a number of activities, and in total we've arrived at 36 tasks and about 178 activities across the entire set. These are all going to be posted to the OALCF portal, and I said earlier that we're preparing a guide to why you want to access these tasks and use them in your program. It'll just be a very brief document. Very quickly, this is an example of a portion of a task, in this case for plumbing, the kinds of things that we did. Tried to use authentic documents, images, actual processes, and so on. The description, the level indicators, and then actual activities that that would be done on the trade. We didn't intend this originally when we were writing tasks, but as we started to develop them, we found that some of the activities we wrote up really set up at a higher complexity level than OALCF level 3. And that I think was a good thing, because it challenged the Quill reference group to answer the question, what do we do? So we chose not to dump them. We chose not to scale them back. We chose to include them, but with a caveat saying some of the activities in this task are higher than OALCF level 3. And I ran that by some LBS practitioners at some forums that I'd done recently, and they were quite happy to see these higher level tasks as really good targets for their learners who are going into the trades. So when you go and access these things, you'll need to watch for that. Here's another task, road safety recall database, automotive service. Similar kind of construction. Automotive service tipped us off to the link to technology and to use of digital devices and so on. When I went into the Toyota dealer here in Thunder Bay and said, can I talk to some apprentices about what they do, he said fine, but he also said what they typically do is go online to access things like customer service bulletins, warranty, recall notices. They have to dig out information, they have to unpack it, find the right vehicle, find the expected follow-up, and so on. It's not just doing the mechanical tasks anymore. It's very much involves online, and of course the technology on the vehicle itself is a whole other set of things. So automotive service in particular is starting to move very highly into the use of digital technology, and that's showing up as strongly in need of the kind of task development that we expect to do going forward. A long quote, and I'll just simply point out a few things in it. The digital divide may also reflect a literacy divide. It's not just that people can't do digital or use digital devices and digital technology, but if you're not reading very well and you're not handling entering information and processing information, or even doing calculations or problem solving on a computer or on a digital device, then that makes it even more challenging to work with. So they say, first, poor literacy may hinder the acquisition of basic ICT skills. You may not be able to read the material to understand how to use it. But second, for those with low levels of proficiency in literacy and numeracy, to handle many of the information management and information processing tasks encountered in online environments will be a challenge. And I think we missed that point, that we need to build both literacy skills, but we also need to build the technology or the digital skills and put them together. This will be a focus of one project going forward if we're approved. We'll apply this same process that we took with the communications and numeracy competencies and apply it to the digital competencies, and try to identify trades that are really strongly impacted by technology, work with Alpha Plus to build on some of their research around digital technology, and then develop a set of tasks for the field. The second area that sort of falls out of this whole research, Project 1, which we looked at supporting apprenticeship completion, Project 2, which looked at developing tasks, we heard that employers' perceptions of apprenticeship training is often a barrier, and we're hoping to move forward with a project, again if approved, to bring together employers and other stakeholders in a number of communities across Ontario to do consultations that go beyond just rehashing the problems to actually trying to explore solutions and moving, you know, from a problems-oriented conversation to a change conversation that says, well, here's what we should do about it, here's what we can do about it. So we'll see, and we'll be inviting interested parties, literacy networks, workforce planning boards, union, trade groups, and others to be involved. So that's my show. If you have questions, if you want to follow up, feel free to contact me either by phone number, email. I'd be happy to chat with you, and I'll open the floor to questions at this point.
Okay, great presentation, Stuart, and we've got a few questions. Just scrolling. Were union halls consulted about applicants applying to be apprentices and issues that the applicants had for writing the exam?
We tried to. In Thunder Bay, we worked with the Northwest Building Trades Council. They were one of our partners in the first project. They were on the advisory in both projects. They represent 13 trades, and they did provide input. I also tried to get a partnership with the Northeastern Building Trade Councils in the Sudbury area. That didn't happen. So it's a challenge. We try, but we can't drag people to the table.
Fair enough. Was there any discussion around connecting with small mom and pop shops that hire apprentices where the employers have literacy issues themselves?
Where the employers have literacy issues?
That's
or
the question.
they have issues with their employees.
I don't know. Perhaps the person can clarify. I'm just reading.
Yeah, okay, well, let's assume that small operations have literacy problems with their employees who are working in the trades, because I can answer that question. That's exactly the focus of our current project, and hopefully of the project that we're going to do on digital technology. We understand that people are working in the trades right now who struggle with literacy. They've gone in the construction trades, for example, with grade 10 as a general education requirement. They've worked in the trades for years, but now the nature of the trade has changed, and the literacy demands, the technology demands are stronger. And so the world in which they work has now become more challenging, and we believe that we can pull people from those employers to work with literacy practitioners to improve their trades. So we've had a little bit of that going on in the past, where people who are employed are working to beef up skills, but we believe because the nature of work is changing that that might drive more activity to us as literacy providers to help employers ramp up the literacy skills in their workplace. And the focus, of course, we're working with is on the trades right now.
Okay, and there is a clarification. Employers themselves have literacy issues as they took over the business from their family. They never obtained a red seal and were grandfathered in due to their experiences and skills they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not, that's a new sort of a look at it that I'm not familiar with, but I understand what's being said. Because, yeah, I'm going to have to pass on that one.
Fair enough.
I think that's probably a question for the College of Trades, quite honestly, and we do have some good contacts with them. We've had some really healthy conversations with some of their representatives. I mean, they're the ones who are saying this is what you need to legally work in the trade in Ontario. And so if there's a requirement to get that certification, they're going to be the ones who would indicate that. If it's okay to be grandfathered in, then I think they would have that call again as a college of trades. You know, they're the keepers of the records, if you like.
Okay. And a comment that this information and all of the work that you guys are doing is great for the college sector. And then a question, what year was the OECD report written?
Oh, the OECD stuff is all the background work for the PIAC study, which is the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies, which was, all the OECD stuff was, I've been tracking it from about 2008 through to 2011, and then the PIAC study came out, I believe, in was done in 2011-12, and the results were released in October of 2013, and the people are still chewing through those, trying to understand them. By the way, Essential Skills Ontario has some terrific bulletins around unpacking what those results mean. I would recommend going there to review them. They're 1 or 2 pages, but they're terrific.
Okay. What are the employers' perceptions of apprenticeship training and related barriers? Can you share some examples?
Well, we expect that they will tell us that I can't afford this because of ratios, or I don't have the proper number of journey persons, that if I train them I'm going to lose them to another employee, that it's too expensive overall for me to be doing this. I can't provide the full scope of practice in my shop. My employees seem to be really poorly matched to the new skill requirements. I'm increasingly using e-learning or digital technology to upgrade and do professional development in the trade, and I have some staff who are, you know, full-time who don't work well with that environment. That's what I expect we'll hear, and I think there's answers for all of those. And we'd like to again shift consultations to challenging those problems and trying to develop solutions, even if they come up with, here's a simple one. It came up over and over and over again in the Sioux, in Sudbury, and Thunder Bay. We have small operations. We can't provide an automotive service apprentice with everything. And people actually in those forums said, well, why can't we cobble together a consortium of small garages who could provide front-end work, could provide brake work, could provide body work, could provide alignment, you know, the full scope of practice by moving an apprentice through a consortium of employers. That would require some planning and some coordination, and somebody would have to do that. But that's the kind of solution I think we need to throw on the table if we want to get people trained.
Okay. Has there been any discussions around the possibility of having newly signed apprentices get a numeracy and literacy assessment before they actually start their apprenticeship?
There's lots of discussion out there. I know that apprentices who go into the college programs, there are pre-tests or entry-level assessments which, you know, you can waive a lot of the work. There's a lot of talk as well for trade qualifiers. These are people who've worked for years in an industry and have all the experience, and they just need to get the qualifying exam, to have a screening tool of some kind up front to say, you know, do you have the literacy skills to handle, you know, going through and writing this exam? That I'm not aware of any, you know, really consistently solid approach to doing those assessments up front. I think it's done on a kind of an ad hoc basis. I wish it was, I'm not aware that it's mandatory anywhere, but it's certainly necessary. And we could use tools that we developed in the first project supporting apprenticeship completions. There's all kinds of great assessment tools that focus on the trades, on on the essential skills. There's in-house tools that literacy people have used. There's terrific stuff across the country that is available, and it would really flag whether someone has the literacy skills to be successful. And I think as far as college programs, they're going to have to make their own call on who they admit to programs. It was interesting when I spoke with the Northwest Ontario Building Trades. They use an exam that they developed in-house. They basically asked the applicant to write about a 5-paragraph essay on a pretty challenging topic as a requirement, and they also gave them a pretty tough math exam. And they didn't admit them to the apprenticeship program if they couldn't get through that. Okay. And guess what? When they turned them away, they sent them off to one of the private colleges down the street because they didn't know the college was available. Okay. So there's some real disconnects here.
Okay, and the person who asked that question has actually sent in a follow-up note. If apprentices are not required to be assessed, I don't think they'll do it. However, they could then start an apprenticeship but not complete it due to feeling lost and being frustrated with the content. And they probably won't ever try again thinking they're unable to handle it, when in reality they might with the proper upfront skills.
I agree absolutely, and that becomes a philosophy of whether you admit and you then treat for success after, or whether you treat for success before you admit them and then you bring them in. Mm-hmm. And colleges, for example, have a lot of resources around the student services and so on to support learners once they're in. We actually found at Algonquin they have even their special needs coordinator is especially signed to the trades group for persons who have disabilities. So my bias is to admit them if they look like they can do it, and then to follow them through and provide that additional support to ensure they succeed.
Okay. And a few people have asked if your project report is available online or where they might be able to find it.
It's not online yet because I haven't finished writing it. But I expect that we will have the final project report available for sure late in April, all within our due deadlines. And it'll be available on the Northern Network's website. We'll certainly post it there as well as other materials. Okay. But it's just we're not going to publish a lot of hard copies of it. It's just not necessary anymore.
Okay, but it will be online, so that's great.
Yes, it will be, yes.
Okay, so why do you think, and this is going back to the beginning part of your presentation, why do you think secondary schools don't promote the skilled trades more? It's constantly in the news that we need skilled trades. I think we've all seen, Mike Holmes promoting that for sure. But still in 2014, the high school my son attends is not actively promoting the skilled trades in the guidance department. There seems to be a lot of lip service regarding the trades from the school system.
Well, we heard in, I don't know which project, but we heard I think in our apprenticeship forums that we've been doing for the last year or so, that a lot of the curriculum paths in the high schools don't include trades to the extent that they used to. So there's not as many options for people to enroll in trades kinds of courses or programs. I don't know if that's true, but I suspect it is. And it's still, I think, the same history. The people who are going to those teachers' colleges and going to teach in the high school have a university orientation. I think that's still there. I don't think we have people who really understand the value and the importance and the kind of rigor that the trades have to really promote it to their students. One of the recommendations was trying to get employers, trying to get trade union groups and others to go directly into the high schools and work face-to-face with students to try to recruit them and move them into some kind of path early. It happens in other countries and it's very smooth.
And I remember when I used to live up north that the local training board did a lot of work on promoting the trades and coming into the schools and doing like trade information fairs at the schools and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Okay.
It may be more attractive to younger kids now if you know, maybe promoted from a technology side of things, that it may be a different kind of work, quite honestly, and it may be more attractive to younger people.
Okay. Okay, and I think that is it for the questions. You've got both Robin and Stuart a number of comments saying thanks and great presentation, which is absolutely true. So great job, folks. And as people are exiting, just to note that you will receive an evaluation via email, and we very much appreciate you taking the time to complete that.